Good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Taewook Cha. I'm a co-chair of ASLA New York Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee and the organizer of the event. As a committee co-chair, I am very excited to present this quarterly webinar series that focuses on the work, career, service, and leadership of prominent and soon to be prominent BIPOC professionals in landscape architecture. As the title suggests, this webinar is set in a dialogue format between established and emerging professionals, rather than the typical standard presentation format we're all used to. The aim of the webinar is to advocate the talents and contributions of our BIPOC members and have a dialogue to highlight and celebrate the diversity of our landscape architecture community. Tonight, we're joined by Stephen Lee, a design principal at SWA Balsley in New York City, and Nicole Cheng, a public realm planner and an emerging professional at New York City DOT. Stephen is a landscape architect, urban designer, and planner with a passion for crafting engaging and resilient urban landscapes. Stephen's built work includes notable projects such as Drexel Square in Philadelphia, the Ghayath Trail at Expo 2020 in Dubai, Trillium Park in Toronto, and 87 Park in Miami Beach. Stephen holds an undergraduate degree from Claremont McKenna College and a Master of Landscape Architecture and Master of City Planning from the University of California, Berkeley. Stephen is also a member of ASLA, ULI, and APA, and a fellow at the Urban Design Forum. Nicole is an interdisciplinary artist and designer committed to building the infrastructures for queer futures she wants to experience within her lifetime. Alongside her work redesigning New York City's public realm, her artistic pursuits continue to experiment with what it means to make art in community. She holds a Master of Landscape Architecture and Regional Planning from the University of Pennsylvania. Nicole is also the winner of this year's ASLA New York DEI grant for LARA program. Please note this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be shared at ASLA New York YouTube website. Now, please set your view to speaker mode and mute your microphone on your Zoom screen for the dialogue to start. Toward the end of the program, we will have a time for an additional dialogue between the audience and the speakers. Stephen and Nicole, please take it away.
Thank you, Taewook. Stephen, do you want to go first?
I think you should go. You go
Okay.
first.
Um, okay. So I just have the very informal deck, just some photographs to get a sense of where I'm coming from. This is me in Singapore. I don't know if anybody here has been to Singapore, but this is not usually what people see when they go to Singapore. I think I just put this photo here to kind of show I think a lot of us from East Asia, even if you are coming from the cities, there's very much this village mentality not too long ago, like if your grandparents and your parents. And that's really where I feel like I pull a lot of my culture and heritage from is like rural tropical areas. Um, my kind of journey into landscape architecture really started about 10 years ago. This is my first public art project when I was 18. And in Central Falls, Rhode Island, where I was doing a art installation project with this local senior home to kind of decorate their community garden. And two projects that I thought would kind of be interesting to pull into discussion for today. This is a recent project I collaborated on while working at the Department of Transportation in New York City. This is part of what we call a street improvement project. So a project that takes about 1 to 3 years. I don't know if anybody's walked by this recently, but this is on Pearl Street and St. James Street, and you can see it if you kind of walk from the financial district into Chinatown. And I was part of helping design and implement this, as well as curating the designers and the whole sort of community outreach process with Chinatown. And we can kind of, I think, get into it with Stephen later on. This is another photo from that project. And another project that I was recently involved in, I was a fellow at the Urban Design Forum and really exploring what it means to design for older adults in New York City and learning from queer elders. So this is a photo from a workshop that I led at the Sage Center in Midtown Manhattan, which is this national organization, and they operate 5 different older adult centers focusing on LGBTQ older adults in New York City. Pass it back to Stephen. Stephen, are you able to?
I think you have to stop sharing first. There we go.
Okay.
Oh. All right. Does everyone see my screen here? Hopefully you don't see the wrong screen. Yeah, we're good?
We see a Venn diagram.
Okay, Venn diagram, great. Well, I don't have to really go through the Venn diagram because Tewuk already gave such a great intro, but I'm really happy to be part of this BIPOC dialogue with Nicole. I really want to thank Tewuk and the DEI committee and ASLA New York. I think it's a really valuable series, and hopefully today will be a good follow-up to the 3 amazing BIPOC dialogues that have already occurred before. I kind of felt the need to present a little bit about myself because I'm not a household name like Elizabeth Kennedy or Richard Alomar or Tewuk Cha. So just is a little bit about me and my background. Just more on a personal level, you know, this is just from my Instagram grid. But I, grew up in Southern California. I went to spend a few years in the Bay Area and now live in New York for about the last 12 years. But in my free time, I love to travel around the world. I love art and culture. Cooking is really one of my favorite pastimes. It's really where I find where it's a very meditative act for me. So it's a great break from the intensity of work. And I'm also very lucky that I have a lot of family in New York now that have moved from California to New York. And so I have my mom and my brother and my niece and nephew nearby. And I live in Long Island City with my partner and our fur baby, Otto, our border terrier. And in the office, I like to think of myself as kind of a multifaceted designer. I love working in all different types of media. I love collaborating with people in the office and really finding together collectively, finding the most innovative solutions to the challenges that we face. And I was really drawn to landscape architecture through my passion for cities and public open space. So that has been the focus for a lot of my career. But having said that, working at the types of firms that I have, which are definitely not niche type firms, I really touched on a lot of different types of project work. So from public open space, urban design and planning, which is my foray into landscape architecture, but also, institutional, commercial, residential, hospitality, kind of runs the whole gamut. And also working all over the country and internationally because of the type of work that my firms have done. And these are just a few of the projects with Westgate public open space projects, as well as, projects in very different cultural contexts and climates. I've, with the kind of urban design and planning background that I have, I've done a lot of district planning projects all over the US. And then also some fun institutional projects like this one that's currently being built in the Bronx, and residential as well, down in Miami Beach with West State. That's just kind of a quick intro, and I guess we'll stop sharing. We'll stop doing the boring presentation and dive into our fun dialogue. So, Nicole, back to you.
Um, wow, Stephen, you've done so many projects. I can only hope maybe in 10 years' time that's going to be me too.
Well,
Um,
I would say about 50 of them, 50% of them or more never went past a certain stage, which is, I think, just the nature of the work that we do. But yeah, it's been a fun ride.
I guess kind of going to the core of, I think, the spirit of this dialogue series. How, you mentioned that you have family, you've also moved to New York, like you feel like you have kind of a family network here. Could you tell a little bit more about your diaspora story?
Sure, yeah. So my parents immigrated to the US from Korea, South Korea, in the 1970s. My dad's side of the family, my dad, like most Korean immigrants at that time, one person would come and then try to bring the rest of the family here. So my dad was really the first one in his family. I think it was actually like 1969 when he got to the US. And he worked, got his degree, worked and saved up money, and then eventually brought the rest of his family. And they mostly landed in the LA area. My mom, on the other hand, she's the second youngest, but a lot of her older siblings came first and landed in the New York area. So my whole mom's kind of extended side of my mom's family ended up in New York and my dad's family in LA. My mom, because of that, we would often visit my mom's family in LA, in New York growing up. And I think I always had an inkling that I might end up here. But yeah, that's sort of the story.
I guess if you, I feel like that kind of echoes like other Asian Americans that I've met where it's very much like you kind of have like your country of origin
Hmm.
and then you like end up in the US. Like, have you ever traced, I guess, like more family history, like
Mm.
within Korea? Like, do you have access to those stories?
Um, I don't. I actually feel pretty disconnected to family that remains in Korea. I did do 23andMe, and it was a very boring result. It was like 95% Korean, 3% Chinese, 2% Japanese. So I was a little disappointed. I was hoping to find something more interesting. A friend of mine who is Dominican had like the most fascinating 23andMe you can imagine, but mine was pretty boring. Um, yeah, but what's interesting about my childhood is like I grew up in a community that was actually mostly not majority Chinese American. So a lot of my friends growing up were of Chinese ancestry or Taiwanese. And I often got mistaken for being Chinese because of my last name, Lee. It's very ambiguous. It could be Korean, it could be Chinese, but everyone just assumed it was Chinese. And I actually had to learn. My friends taught me how to say in Mandarin, I'm Korean, I don't speak Chinese. And I used to use that a lot. So, what about Nicole? What about your own upbringing? Tell us a little bit about that.
Um, I immigrated to the US when I was 18. Um, I'm not the first person like in my very extended family, like there are hundreds and hundreds of people in my family. Um, but I am sort of like within the more nuclear family. Um, and prior to that, like I basically, in terms of people that family members I've actually been able to talk to, and trace back, I know that like I'm originally from China for sure. I'm pretty sure if I did 23andMe, it would also be very boring in terms of like genetics.
Yeah.
But in terms of like migratory story, like my family on both sides has not been in China for like 3 to 5 generations. Um, and has kind of traveled through, like, particularly on my mother's side, like through southern China, like through the Lusophone world, and then me kind of like I grew up in Hong Kong, but basically every generation of my family has moved to a different continent and country.
Hmm.
Um, and simultaneously, I also have this like I don't know if you've ever encountered this, but some Chinese people have what they call it's like an ancestral book. So
Hmm.
I can trace like my patrilineal heritage for more than 19 generations. And
Wow.
supposedly my original, like my surname is tied to a specific like emperor. And you can supposedly find like the grounds of my original ancestors. Like there are these 3 mounds. I mean, I have no idea if this is real, but they like there's like a temple and there are these burial mounds, and they sell like a facsimile of this ancestral book. Like there's a real book where you basically calligraph like in your name,
Wow.
and then they make like copies of it. But because I'm a woman after this generation, basically I won't be included in this book. Um, and so yeah, I feel like when I think about like my diasporic story, I can kind of like with when you were talking about like being a Korean person, like growing up a majority Chinese family, I also feel like when I encounter people, like when they think about Chinese people, it's like, oh, you're from like a very monolithic culture.
Hmm.
And when I think about Chinese culture, like I think about all the different like diasporic Chinese cultures that my family's been a part of, and now I'm kind of part of this like
Yeah.
Chinese diaspora with the US at
Yeah,
its
of course.
center.
No, and even with Asian American, that's like a massive category that includes everything from South Asia, Southeast Asia, all the way up to the Northeast. So it's very easy, and I think it's human nature to just want to create generic categories for things because it's easier to comprehend rather than the complexity of like billions of people across a massive continent. But yeah, there's just so much nuance and difference within the Asian community.
I got, yeah. And I guess in that, like, I was thinking about preparing for this dialogue. Something that kind of struck me was like that some people may not find community where their ancestry is from. So I was kind of curious, we talked a little bit about, like, before this about like being part of the LGBTQ,
Hmm.
like, demographic. Like, I think friends and like other people I've talked to, like, people have varying viewpoints, I think, when it comes to like race and queerness and where you find community. Like, I don't know, do you have any kind of like story? Like I remember that you were talking about how like kind of coincidentally you were going to school for landscape architecture,
Right.
also kind of figuring out like your sexuality at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
No, it's interesting because I've like lived two very different lives. Like when I was growing up, like many other Korean households, we would go to church. We went to church not only every Sunday, but we spent most of the day there on Sundays. I would also go on Saturdays, Saturday evenings, and there was this whole fellowship thing. And so from like the age of, I don't know, kindergarten, first grade, all the way until I would say the beginning of college, I found community in my Korean church. And that, I still really appreciate that. I'm not religious at all now. I'm definitely agnostic. But I appreciated that because it did give me community and it did give me a close-knit group of friends and people that I trusted and had a lot of fun with at the same time. But then, becoming an adult and coming out was, kind of in many ways alienated me from that existence that I had in my childhood growing up in a church where they told you homosexuality was a sin and all this sort of stuff. So as an adult, I have found more community in like the queer community. I still have a very diverse set of friends, but it's not necessarily Korean or Asian focused. And it also is, yeah, as you were pointing out, I came out in grad school, which was somewhat late, and it was this, I would say this amazing time of my life where I was coming out, but I also discovered landscape architecture and the amazing work that you can do as a landscape architect. So it was a pretty magical time of my life where I felt like I truly found who I was and what I wanted to do. And because of that, I think since then I've really found that sense of community both within the queer community as well as a lot of my friends are landscape architects, because I think we have like a shared interest in the planet, in making cities livable, in public space, all of those things that kind of bring us together. And plus, landscape architects are just a lot of fun. How about you, Nicole? Where do you find community?
I feel like what you mentioned about alienation like really resonates with me. I think for me, I was raised Catholic, but I don't like church wasn't really where I found community growing up. I think the way that I can relate to the alienation is like thinking about when I immigrated here. Like I kind of had to like it was like every time encountering people, I had to like really neatly package like who am I? Why am I
Mhm.
not exactly what how people like think I am? Why do I speak the way that I do? Like I feel like over time, and we talked a little bit about this, like I I just say that I'm from well, people think I'm from California.
Yeah.
I don't have to say it. But I think a lot of the alienation is really like with my family. Like they definitely like it's been improving over the years, but I think there is this sense that queerness belongs in the West somehow,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and not in Asia, even though, at least for where my family has lived in a lot of like former British colonies, like um, criminalizing queerness was an explicit part of a colonial regime.
Mhm.
So I think that there's a little bit of amnesia when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think kind of similar to you, it's like I feel like my friends are, I find a lot of community in queer community, and my friends are really like culturally diverse, but not necessarily Asian. Like that's
Mhm.
something that I honestly actually moving to New York City is a place where I feel like that for the first time is viable in some way. Because other places I've lived, there just simply aren't a lot of Asians, period. Not even just like East Asians or Chinese people, just Asians at all.
Yeah.
Like going to college in Vermont,
Mhm.
um, living in like South Carolina, in
Mhm.
Minnesota, like these are not places with a lot
Right.
of Asians.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I've like now, I think I'm nearing like 10 years living in the US.
Okay.
Um, and I've, for a really long time, I rejected the idea of being Asian American. And I'm kind of coming around to it, like being like, oh, maybe I should know more about Asian American history, instead of kind of brushing off what I think people assuming what that means and realizing like what you were saying, like it's such a broad category that I think actually even, as an Asian American, like it can be hard to really pinpoint like what people pin you as.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, how do you feel like kind of all these different identities show up in your career as a landscape architect? Like, do you feel like there was a particular project, um, or maybe a particular experience in an office where you feel like this came up for you?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any particular project, but I think that subconsciously in my childhood and growing up in like a conservative suburb in Southern California, and then going to church in a conservative church, I think I subconsciously kind of wanted to escape a lot of that. And so moving away, far away, even though it was with near my family who's here, none of them are religious and they're much, I would say they're more like Americanized in a way. But it was a way of escaping that. And I think it's not a coincidence that like cities are magnets for queer people. Queer people want to be in cities because they want to live in a place where they're going to feel, not feel judged, live freely, not have to live up to the expectations or societal kind of norms that might be stronger in smaller communities. And there's a sense of just kind of no one really cares what you're doing, right? Everyone's too busy to take notice of what that other person on the subway is doing or how they're dressed. You kind of can do whatever you want. So I think being a landscape architect in New York City is kind of like a dream job in a way. I love that we get to create public spaces that are welcoming and inclusive, where people can, of all different backgrounds, of all different orientations, can come and really feel like this is their space. I'm sure you probably feel the same way too, right, Nicole? Especially working at DOT, you're really, really, really focused, hyper focused on the New York public realm.
Yeah, I think I feel like I'm working kind of in the like I've seen too much behind the curtain.
Mm,
Like I mean, I think maybe because I haven't like I've worked outside of the US, but in the capacity as an artist, so I think I have less experience kind of coming in from like an institutional standpoint of like what it means to create space like in other countries like you were showing.
hmm.
Um yeah, like do you think like I guess in saying that, are you like where is that coming from for you? Like is that are you comparing that to like projects you've done in other places?
Um, I just mean that I guess for myself, I have worked on a variety of projects, and some of them are more near and dear to my heart, and others of them are just kind of, okay, it's a project. It's paying the bills. It's keeping the lights on, and we do it. But even in those projects, and even if they're in places of the world where like being homosexual is still criminalized, I still find that the fact that we're designing like public space that ultimately are going to be used by every sector of society in that place is still really rewarding to me. Like I think most landscape architects, that's what I love about landscape architects. We're all kind of do-getters. Like ultimately we want to make the world a better place. And yeah, we'll work on like, okay, we'll be hired to do a beautiful resort or hotel. And there are some landscape architects who certainly that's their passion and they're great at it. But I think for me, that's that kind of work in the public realm is really what I feel most passionate about.
Yeah, is there a dream project that you have in mind?
A dream project.
Yeah.
So the dream project would be super high budget, super high profile, and super high impact on the community it's serving. Um, but I think there's not a particular project, but I think any dream project requires like it would require a dream client and a
Mm,
dream team. those things matter to me more because like even if you're working on the most amazing project, if you're working with people who aren't respectful or don't know how to collaborate, it's not going to be a fun project to work on.
Mhm.
So, I mean, what does a dream client mean? I think it's like a client who respects us as professionals. It's a client who you kind of see eye to eye with, and they understand the value of landscape architecture and our craft. It's name all the 10 other characteristics. Clients that pay, clients that give good direction, clients that have a clear vision. And then dream team is, I think, and this is, I emphasize this in my intro, I like really love working with people. I would hate to kind of be off on my own in a studio, kind of trying to design my own projects. That to me is not fun, but you have to have the right team and the right collaborators. And I love working with people that are, super ambitious, want to design something that's never been done. Also, people who don't have, huge egos and actually are respectful and want to work with others and feel that there's something to learn from everybody.
Mhm.
Um, and then just, sometimes you just have really great synergy together, right? Feeding off of each other, feeding off of each other's energy and ideas. And that's really the most ideal scenario. Do you have a dream project?
Um, well, I thought I did, and then you just answered it so eloquently. I was like, maybe I was asking the wrong question.
No.
I feel like for a long time I have wondered whether it's possible to do a project at Reese. Um,
Reese
yeah,
Beach.
at Reese. Like what that would even be, like can you conceive of a client there? Um, like in my mind, like the world that we live in, there would be, I imagine that there's like a clash. There would be a clash between like who the client could be and who the beach serves.
Do you want to
But
give everybody else a 10-second description of
yes,
Reese Beach?
Reese Beach, and maybe you know more than me
No,
actually.
I haven't studied
But
it. I just go there in the summer.
yeah, I was so Jacob Reese Beach um is a very long stretch of beach in the Rockaways. And there's one particular part of the beach that has historically, when I say historically, I think maybe like mid 1900s, potentially even earlier, um, where there's been like documentation of like queer people. And I think the way that they identify it is either like where they're getting the photos from and like it being like a nudist beach because obviously queer people want to be naked on the beach.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like I heard about the beach before I even got to New York City, just as a sort of like mythical place.
Mhm.
Um, and it kind of, in moving to New York 2 years ago, my partner who I live with has been living here for 10 years. So I've like kind of heard about this before I moved here. And it's kind of the place where it's like you lose your gay card if you don't go. That's kind of how I feel about the beach.
Mhm.
Would
You have to
do you
go at
like,
least
yeah.
once every summer.
Like how did you hear about the beach?
I don't even know. Somebody mentioned it to me. I don't even know if I knew it was a queer space the first time I went. But what's so amazing about it is it's like the queer community is also very inclusive and encompasses many different trans, lesbian, gay, all of it's all there. It's not like dominated by like gay men, for example. So it's I think it's a really wonderful space, an inclusive space. It really feels very, very welcoming. to all?
Yeah, I think so the dream project would be to do something. So basically, like I'm sure many people know, climate change, our beaches are
Hmm.
eroding, things are disappearing, and so it's like I think it's an interesting place because it is a very important place, I think, for the like American queer imagination.
Yeah.
Um, but it's important. It's like queerness, it's transient, it's
Yeah.
ephemeral.
Yeah.
Um, and it like I think if there's this sort of I have this kind of like inner battle with myself, which is why like I'm an artist and I'm a designer, where I think in a designer brain,
Hmm.
I'm not designing for ephemerality. Like I'm thinking about infrastructure, I'm thinking about things that like logic and infra and structure is what I think about when I think about design. And then kind of when I think about art, it's all about like ephemerality, like
Hmm.
community. And I haven't really been able to kind of see where they converge
Yeah.
in one project.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that would be very exciting to kind of
Hmm.
step into that realm of possibility in a
Right.
place like that.
Right. No, I think that would be a great project. Can I steal that one?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I think, I think that something it could be more than like Marsha P. Johnson Park, for
Hmm. Yeah.
example. Like I feel like there's like that's an example for me of like I think it's a really great like monument to her and but at the same time it's like somehow there's like something missing. I don't know like
Hmm.
what it is. But it's like something about the spirit and the ephemerality is like missing from the placemaking.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, this is kind of like a like parallel topic.
Okay.
Before this, we were talking a little bit more about like Asian identity in the workplace and in school, and sort of like, you mentioned like dream team. I'm thinking about like the team that you currently work with at SWA and like how it seemed like we have like mirrored experiences with me in grad school and you at SWA.
Hmm.
Um, could you like talk a little bit more about like any reflections or challenges like you've had following our like yeah, reflections you've had following our conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a very important topic. Um, I I was born in the US, but of course my parents are Korean immigrants. So I've always had this inner struggle of that dual identity of being both Asian and American. And if you think about it, American culture and Asian culture are very, very different, right? Almost like polar opposite. American culture, which is derived from European and really British culture, is all about like individualism. It's about very direct style of communication, openly expressing your feelings and ideas. And Asian culture, and I don't want to generalize too much, but at least I'll say at least East Asian culture emphasizes collectivism. It emphasizes, looking out for the benefit of the group over the individual. There's an emphasis on modesty, on maybe a more subtle style of communication and also respecting authority. So these things kind of can clash because in America, we're taught one to behave in a certain way, and this is especially for professionals, this is how you're supposed to behave in the workplace. But on the other hand, there's that kind of the cultural norms that I've learned through my parents. And there's always that inner struggle and that inner tension. And I feel like I always kind of tried to be both, but also failed at both. Like I was not Korean enough. I actually, one thing I'm still somewhat embarrassed by is that I never properly learned how to speak Korean. So it was always embarrassing to be around Korean speakers who couldn't speak English because I felt like I was a bad Korean. I didn't respect the culture enough to learn it properly. I mean, even to this day, it's something I still feel a little shame about. But then on the other hand, the American side, I always felt like I was being judged and stereotyped based on my appearance of being Asian. So I wasn't really ever seen as American as like a white American or anyone else. And what's interesting about that experience is like if you think about our field of landscape architecture, I would venture to say the largest minority group is Asian, but Asian, like not American born Asian, but Asian immigrant. And so for myself, I feel with many of those Asian designers, I feel both connection as well as distance because of that whole Asian American part of my identity. Um, and like in terms of connection, I see in them maybe many of the struggles that my parents had to go through as Asian immigrants in the US. Like I remember at the dinner table growing up, my dad would tell stories or really complaining about work and how he felt like he was being discriminated against and he was being passed up for promotions over his white colleagues and really just was at a complete disadvantage because of these cultural biases in the workplace. And so as I'm now, a established professional in the offices that I'm working in, I try to be cognizant of those cultural biases that we have and allow kind of different ways of working and communicating that I know different people have different ways of doing that based on their cultural upbringing. But at the same time, I also try to be a mentor to those like younger Asian designers because I want them to succeed, right? And being successful in the field, at least if you're working in the US, I think it does require a little bit of adaptation to the cultural norms of working in America. So I try to be that mentor to them as much as I can, recognizing that that was really the same journey that my parents went through as well.
I'm sure everybody who works with you at SW is like Stephen is such an empathetic leader. I mean, it sounds like you're saying that like you were describing sort of being pulled in different directions, but like you also are now a principal there. And like despite sort of these challenges and obstacles that you faced, like you found your own way to lead and be
Yeah.
the mentor in a way that feels authentic to you.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Um,
I'm not a perfect leader by any means, but thank you. And what
um,
about you? I mean, I know that you have a complicated sense of identity as well because of your background, just like being Chinese, but not growing up in China and then coming to the US and everyone thinking that you're Californian.
yeah, I think, and I'm keeping eye on the time, so I'll like
Oh, okay.
close this quick. Um, I think I'm like a big resolutions person, and uh, in my mind, the year is over. So I'm thinking about like what is in the future and what's for 2026, and I feel like acting in a way that feels free is like what feels like sort of kind of rather than feeling very conflicted and complicated about words. Sometimes I've tried to kind of think about, okay, well, like how can I act more free and like what actions can I do and what practices can I adopt that really make me feel like myself and the words will follow. And maybe that's kind of returning to maybe a more like East Asian way of, like kind of dwelling on silences.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that is like yeah, instances where I've met people like you'll know what feels real, and people will receive you, I think, with a similar sincerity and generosity when you kind of put that kind of energy in the world. And like, especially for folks where like English is not your first language, I think
Mhm.
there's like a lot of value in seeing uh, like paying attention to what people really bring to the table beyond like the words that they speak.
Yeah. And there's lots of different ways of communicating beyond words. And I like what you're saying about just being your authentic self. I love that.
I think now we're maybe open to questions. If people in the audience have any questions.
I have a question. Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal. Um, my question is, I believe we all somewhat feeling self-conscious in some phases in your career, and how do you overcome that self-conscious and advocate for yourself in the workspace?
Really good question. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that it takes a little bit of time to gain confidence, I will say. Like you can't graduate from school and like suddenly act like you know everything. I mean, that's one thing I love about the work that we do. It seems like it's a field and a practice where you can learn for your entire career. You're always going to learn new things. But I do think it's important to have a certain level of self-confidence in the way that you carry yourself, in the way that you interact with others, and bring that professionalism, maturity, and confidence to each of your interactions. Even if you don't know everything, like I tell people, sometimes you got to fake it till you make it, but that can help you advance as well. Nicole, you want to add anything to that?
I feel like I was gonna say the same things as you.
Okay.
Like I think especially as somebody who's an emerging professional, the self-confidence like might feel more difficult, but once you recognize your own value, then
Yeah.
other people, like people can only recognize the value that you recognize in yourself. Like I think sometimes I found like in especially talking to other women of color, like there's a sort of that you're waiting for a validation and permission to show up in your professional life in the way that you feel like you should be respected. Um, but people can't read minds, and people, like everyone's busy, everyone's sort of like got something else going on. And so I think like being able to put your best foot forward and believe in yourself. And I think also with what you're saying about not knowing everything, I think perfectionism is something that at least so being like 2 years out of school, I think my peers still really struggle with, I struggle with to a certain extent. But if we're working in a really collaborative profession, the point of working all together is that you don't have all the answers and everyone has a different point of view.
Mhm.
And that's how like design moves.
Yeah. And another thing, Crystal, I don't know if this is for many Asian designers who their second language, their English is their second language. I'm sure there are insecurities around speaking and accent and not having perfect grammar. But I would say I've worked with so many talented designers who didn't have the most perfect English speaking, and communication. But you can see past the accent and the grammatical errors. You can see when someone has great ideas or they're really smart or very thoughtful. So I wouldn't worry too much about, for those out there who are insecure about that, I wouldn't worry so much about it and let the ideas really carry you, not focus so much on not having perfect English.
Oh, thank you so much. That's another question in the back of my head.
Okay.
Thank you both.
I have a question to Stephen. By the way, for those of you who are okay with being on a camera, I would appreciate if you can turn on your camera while we're having this audience conversations. Like you don't have to, but if you're okay, please. So, Stephen, I was very moved by your story of your time during the grad school when you found landscape architecture. Also, you came out as a queer person. You described as the most magical time, but I can also only imagine it must be a very difficult time too.
Mm-hmm.
And being from Korean American or Korean family, wanting to become anything other than doctors, lawyers, or engineer, and also being a queer person, like those are the two big
Yeah.
no-nos in that culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you kind of go back to the time and tell us a little more about it? Like finding what you want to do, finding landscape architecture, and coming out as a queer person and finding your true identity.
Yeah.
Like, so finding what you want to do, does it kind of give you the courage to come out as your true identity, or by coming out, does it make you feel confident to pursue what you really want to do? Because both of those are kind of not an easy thing to go for you in your cultural background.
Yeah. No, that's a great question too. I think on the professional side, I feel very fortunate that my parents were always very open-minded about their children's career paths and what they chose to pursue to study. So my brother and I were actually the outliers in our family. My brother studied English in college, and they all said, "You're not going to make any money, but sure, if you want to go be a writer, go be a writer." And I chose political science for undergrad and then landscape architecture. And all along, I felt very supported by both my parents in those choices. Um, my dad's side, everyone else became a doctor or a dentist. There's one dentist and everyone else is a doctor. Um, on the coming outside, you're right. It was a huge struggle, and it's something that I struggled with for many years because I knew my parents would have a really hard time with it. My dad had passed away already by the time I was ready to come out, but my mom really she did not take it well. She went into a very dark place, and we did not talk for a while. But eventually she came around to it, and actually now I think it opened her eyes to a whole nother world that with the time when she was going to the church and living in this community, I think she was much more had a much smaller view of the world, and now she's so much more open-minded about everything. She is a big advocate of LGBTQ rights, and I'm very proud of how far she's come, really. And she's very happy for me now. I'm happy that I was able to find myself.
Do you feel your work, because a lot of your work is in public sector, helping communities, people in need. Do you think that played any role, kind of help your mother to embrace both your
Hmm.
profession and who you are?
I don't know. I don't know if we've ever thought about that connection. I mean, I have thought about that connection. I don't know if my mom has. I was on this uh, LGBTQ panel that ASLA New York did with Build Out Alliance. And my mom insisted on coming, and I was very embarrassed because I was the only speaker whose mom was in the audience. But she told me how, first of all, she said she felt very sad because she didn't know how hard it was and all the struggles, not just for me, but all the other panelists. but she said it was very enlightening for her. I don't know if she put two and two together, the whole thing about queerness and like public space, but I think it was a good experience for her to be a part of that.
That's really amazing. Thank you.
Other questions?
Don't be shy.
Well, we have a few more minutes. Slavika, you wanted to have a conversation at the end? You have a question?
Well, I think that these two young people told they already answered a lot of questions. So, um, great stories, great presentation, and was really enjoying listening and watching you guys talking about your past, your experience, your vision, everything. So, um, kudos. What can I say?
Yeah, I hope we did you proud, Taewok and DEI committee. I know that the last three were a hard act to follow, but I think it was still a good dialogue. And Nicole, you did amazing as with your questions and moving things along in a very fluid way. I think your podcast experience helps with that.
Thank you.
Both of you were just amazing. So.
Thank you, Slavika.
Great. So thank you, Stephen and Nicole, for the most candid conversation tonight. Every time we do this dialogue, I feel like I was just being invited to your own living room and listening to your stories. I really appreciate both of you for opening up and sharing your most intimate stories. So that's a wrap today. We hope to see you all in spring for the next dialogue with Stephen Tupu of Terrain, New York City. We're planning in sometime in March next year. Freshly elevated this year, Stephen is ASLA New York's first Pacific Islander Fellow. So I'm very proud of him and really looking forward to that dialogue. So thank you and good night and happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays to all of you.
Thank you.
Good
Happy
night.
holidays.